The thing is, when you get so specific about something, you find the needle in the haystack. I knew from the very beginning, and I think by then a lot of people knew I was really already committed to the work I was doing being in a sustainable space and driving equity forward. I definitely was an early proponent of, if the programming is diverse and equitable, we don't have to have a frickin' conversation about it. The whole point of it will be what is delivered, and it will be good. What I really want to know is the design of this experience has a ripple effect. Why I started in food was for belonging. Why I fell in love with food was belonging and seeing more representation. What is the ripple effect of helping people understand themselves better through food and beverage? I will always love food and beverage, but I'll always love people feeling like they belong and making discoveries about themselves and a subject more. I have to always remember, sometimes you're ahead of your time, and that's okay.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Perfect Bite podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Perkins. When you walk into your favorite restaurant or winery, what are the things that stand out to you? The food is incredible, the wine is to die for, and the hospitality makes you feel right at home. It's all about the overall experience. Today's guest is an expert at experience design across the food and beverage industry and pairs it all with a mission focused on community, equity, and diversity. After all, the perfect third spaces make everyone feel welcome. Please welcome the founder of Maryam Co. and partner at PLAYTE Kitchen, Maryam Ahmed. Hello.
Hi. Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Thank you so much for being on. You and I met on the most incredible day in LA, put on by Cherry Bomb, the membership organization for women in food and beverage. We were at Cherry Jubilee, and it may be the most joyful conference I've ever been to.
An amazing room, like the best. So much energy.
Yes, it kind of felt like Greta Gerwig's Barbie Land finally came to life. You know?
It's so true, especially with the wardrobe.
Very much so. Yes. Today I don't have on cherries. I do have a Cosmopolitan.
I love Cosmo. My friends make fun of me sometimes because of how much I like Cosmos, but they're just a quintessential, delicious, minimum ingredient drink if they're made right. So I love that you're repping it, honestly. Making me feel better.
Oh, I'm so glad because, like, I haven't had one in a minute. You know, I love a dirty martini if we're talking about a night out with the girls. But there is something so classic about a Cosmo, and bring them back. Cranberries are great for the holiday season. Let's lean in.
I'm in. As far as I'm concerned, they were never gone.
They were never out.
I've been just kind of solo repping them for a while, I think. Yeah.
You're just the Carrie Bradshaw of your group. It's fine. Well, Maryam, I'd love to take things back to the beginning. I'd love to hear when you first fell in love with food and wine. What were your favorite foods as a kid, and what was eating really like growing up in your home?
So many good questions all in a row. I grew up in upstate New York, and that definitely played a role in the food that I had around me. I think in two parts. One, upstate New York is very proud of their just championing of the carb group, generally speaking,
yes.
Right? We have pizza and bagels and fried chicken wings and, like, you name it, we've carved it up in some way.
Yes.
And then the second piece of that, where I grew up, in New York, is a really interesting place in upstate New York. It's an intersection. Like, a lot of folks from international communities lived there. And so I also had access to really great Greek food and Indian food and more increasingly Thai food. And that was really great to have growing up, you know, exposure to those communities and also to their food. And so I think, like, if I rewind even further back, I realized I liked food because it helped people talk. I had a kind of interesting family dynamic, and which I know we can dive into more, but basically this concept of, like, people, you know, not getting along. Imagine a holiday dinner, not everybody agrees. We're about to go into that period. So, like, everyone maybe feels this in a visceral way. But, you know, I was raised with my mom. She grew up in Western New York and had this family that, like, always got along. And the first year I realized that, like, shrimp cocktail made everyone excited, I was like, oh, got it. Like food unlocked for me in this way of like, this is something I can get everyone together around and like maybe peaceful. And I think like as a kid, that probably speaks a lot to some of my experiences as a young kid. But I just really cared, that everyone wanted to spend time together. And so that's like early food memory is just this discovery of someone's really excited about like a menu that I totally made up and had no idea, it was a Christmas Eve menu, shrimp cocktail, clam chowder, like from the can, obviously.
Yes.
Just easy stuff, but stuff that was unifying. And then I think like later, I have just great memories of being an adventurous eater as a kid. So I was super open to trying things. I will say I've been a lifelong anti-escargot person. Unfortunately, I tried it even when I was a kid, and I can't do it now. I'm 36 and I just can't.
Yeah.
But other than that, really, really adventurous palate as a kid. And my family, you asked like about growing up. I grew up in an adoptive household. My mom fostered and adopted several amazing women. I'm the eldest, and my dad lived a couple of hours away, so I would see him less often. And whenever, though, I did see him, we were eating Pakistani food, we were eating Indian food, and I was just kind of a combo kid, I had this as third space, which was the table for me. Like, yes, okay, I get to connect with people and eat really good food. And wine, I think, came later, but for similar reason. This idea that I think even more so when you're in these like more grown-up social spaces, wine is about connection, but also it unlocks so much more to talk about. And I was really intrigued by that. I really love natural curiosity. I love philosophical conversations, and also something that's tied directly to our agriculture and how we steward the land. And so like it was just a really good fit that like furthered what food had already done for me as a young kid.
Holy cow. Your childhood set you up for everything that you ended up doing and why you're so great at it. Thank you for opening up also, by the way, because you're right. I mean, holidays can have really tough times for people. It's not always just like happy slappy. And I like that you saw food as this vehicle for peace, especially during a time when we have seen it weaponized globally in different ways. And so it really makes sense that you ended up doing everything you did because you saw, eldest daughter moment. You were like, if I bring a really good menu to the table, then everyone essentially shuts up for a second.
Yeah,
gets
like
along.
no one had talked to me about food. Like my parents are physicians, my grandma was an optician. Like I was misunderstood.
Like, why this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What is her fascination? I think I was just really hyper focused on, first of all, a moment of peace. It was a big house, lots of people running around and different agendas and all the things. And so like the table was like, we never missed a weeknight meal. Everyone had to sit down and eat, whether we were eating out of the box or my mom was making like her Wednesday night meal, spaghetti and clam sauce or whatever. That's it. There was still always time for that. And I just felt like, I think a lot of relief around the table as much as I felt like it was a great place to share and be in communion. I just don't think when you're young, I don't think you have the name for it, but especially if you have like a chaotic situation happening and then it's like this moment, this breath out, this exhale, that it became really important to me. And yeah, you're right. I think it's been a central theme in my life and in my work ever since.
Definitely. You were an experienced designer before you even had the word for it. Because it was just something you learned essentially to survive and then thrive in these situations. So then tell us about how it led to your career journey. What did you end up going to school for? And where did you start to put these pieces together of food, wine, and I especially love how you mentioned too, agriculture, how we're focused on heritage, science, history, and everything that comes from our land between these two categories.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say I'm a super creative person, but if I look back, I'm like, I found this one thing I really liked and I just kept going for it. I didn't even really try much else. All of my early jobs I worked in banquets. I worked in a neighborhood pizza shop. I was the pizza girl. where you have all the jobs, which is crazy because you're 16, but it was
Yes.
so important, to forget to close the dairy fridge and get screamed at for doing that. You'd never do it again. You're 16, you have a whole career in front of you. You never forget to close the fridge.
Yep.
You get enough burn scars on your arms. You start to learn how to work a deck oven when you're only 5'3". Like, there's just a lot of like really great life lessons and customer service lessons that I had very early on. And after pizza girling, I went into banquets. I explored a lot in that capacity. I even worked as like a AAA baseball mascot, which I do argue is a form of hospitality. I will die on that hill because you have to
Totally.
people are harassing you. And then I decided, in high school, I was like, I was really good at events and kind of gathering. And then I also was starting to have this like stronger food background. And so I applied for Cornell's hotel school, and I ended up going there for my undergrad, which was a really big deal, leaving. I wasn't that far from where I grew up, but there was a lot of distance between where I grew up and where Cornell was and how Cornell was. It was a big and steep learning curve for me. But I went there, and it's just funny, after, even as a kid, like after all that experience, I remember having to go into culinary theory. This is like your literal only culinary like training class at the time in the hotel school. That was a gen ed, like that you had to have in order to graduate. And it was all about cooking. And I had never, ever, ever cooked like that before in my life. And people around me hadn't either. I didn't have like experience to lean on, only just this one rule that my mom always said, which you have to time everything so everything comes out hot. That was like one rule that I had going into school. And I went into that class and like had literally Googled like every single term. Sarah, I didn't know what blanch was. I didn't know like what julienne was. I never ate in these like expensive restaurants or anything before. I had no freaking idea what I was doing, to be honest.
No.
And the first assignment, I will literally never forget. It was a Cobb salad. I never had avocado once in my life growing up, and I didn't eat bacon because my dad is Muslim. And so this like whole thing like out of my wheelhouse, So I went like just shaking in my boots. I'm gonna fail. This is the class that's gonna bring me down. I haven't even been here a whole year yet. I'm not gonna make it. And I was the only kid at the time that walked in with a whole list of what the hell am I doing today? I had like done this mise en place. And the chef literally by the end of the first class was like, do you want to TA this? And so it was just like opened my eyes.
You were prepared.
Yeah.
Your anxiety fueled over preparation. And like, that's kind of the superpower behind anxiety, I like to think.
I mean,
is
yeah.
set yourself up for success so then you can feel a lot more confident. That's incredible.
I mean, I was terrified. I just don't know that I walked in with any level of confidence, but I was gonna at least know that I did my best. And I think that's like something that I've really done since I was young, it's just like, well, if I fail, I'm going to go down swinging. I'm going to try. And so anyway, I'm just saying, I told that story to say it fast-tracked my passion for sure, like in food and beverage operations. I graduated from Cornell. While I was at Cornell, I worked at a winery nearby. Early on, I was still getting used to this world. Like I was kind of averse to going straight into a corporate setting. It didn't feel like a good fit. I hadn't ever had experience in that before. And so I asked a local winery if I could intern there. I basically designed the internship and handed it to them and was like, this is what I have to do. Can you just sign off on this? And I'll do anything you ask. And it was actually amazing because what ended up happening was like, I got this 360 view of what it was like to be a supplier. And then the following year, I got picked up by a larger company to go and intern and then later become a full-time employee of a distribution company in New York City. And it was because I had supplier experience. Meanwhile, I was just like, trying to feel like I fit somewhere. And so New York City, distribution, fine dining for just long enough to know that fine dining is not for me, respect to everyone who it's for, like so much. Right. And then naive, like lover of wine and passionate storyteller started seeing all of these amazing brand stories like fall through the cracks in the market. The wine hits distribution, the stories disappearing. I'm sad about that because I'm 22 and everyone should know every story there is. And I start to think about like also missing the outdoors. And I just decided like maybe I can help solve some of these issues for myself and the industry if I go and learn the language of the small business owner and the winemaker. And I had enough of that language to understand like maybe a clear next step could be going and getting an enology and viticulture degree. And so I left New York City to go to Walla Walla to pursue
Wow.
Walla Walla, Washington, because some people think it's in Oregon. It's in Washington State.
Yes, Walla, Washington.
Yes. And that was over 10 years ago. And I got a winemaking degree. And while I was there, because the industry was still growing, still learning, it was for sure already existent and poised to expand. But there were a lot of standards and things like that that they hadn't set yet. And so I felt really lucky because I kind of landed and was able to bring a lot of my experience as an undergrad and working at a winery and then distributor to help them build those standards. I consulted on the experiential and educational side of things while I was getting my science degree. And then the second real half of that story is that in the end of my time in Walla Walla, like I knew after getting the degree, I was more certain then that like education and experiential was what I wanted to pursue. You know, I really wanted to lean into that side of my skill set. And I never imagined that I would live in California growing up in upstate. It was just like really aspirational. I never thought about it. And then a job with the Culinary Institute of America became available. They had purchased a building in Napa called Copia, which had been originally founded by Julia Child and Robert Mondavi.
Oh my goodness.
And I had read about it while I was at Cornell and thought, oh my gosh, how amazing. And I applied for this role that eventually kind of catapulted to opening the building and just a much larger role than I started with in 5 years. And then I started Maryam Company in 2020. So that's like the long, short version of it all that I just like, I'm trying to give the reason behind all of these things too, in case anyone's trying to figure it out.
This is incredible. I mean, like your through line to me makes so much sense. Again, still at the end of the day, like you're a go-getter, you're a self-starter, like all the words you want behind an entrepreneur. You're now a multi-hyphenate, multi-time entrepreneur. You had started hospitality at one point during
I know.
all of
I
this
can't
too.
believe you found that. That's amazing. Yes. Hospitality. That was
It's my job to dig.
That's what I called it. That's what I called my consulting company while I was in Walla Walla. I was like trying to relate it to wine. I will say a lot of people didn't understand the play on words like 10, 15 years ago. But now like more and more people use Eno. So I have to always remember sometimes you're ahead of your time and that's okay. That's okay.
Agreed.
Part of being a multi-hyphenate.
Well, yeah, and it's part of being someone who loves to think outside the box. Like, I had attempted a startup like way before you saw a ton of women's peer-to-peer fashion rental spaces. And like to this day, I'll get articles from people raising like Series A, Series B, being like, you just were a little early. Like, people just weren't ready. Yeah. So I think you're a visionary. And this was really special. I want to really highlight this role more that you had at CIA, at Copia. I mean, again, like I went to school in the Bay Area, was just in Napa, and I missed you the other month. And there's just something so special, especially when you're coming from the South, from the city, and you're entering and it's just suddenly turns green and the vineyards come into view and you're in this area of the country and the world alone that then has produced many top chefs, top winemakers, and it's kind of this just haven. It's this haven for people who love both. So tell me more about how you were approached by CIA and then what this exact programming and department you built out. I mean, that was over a number of years before you even started Maryam & Co. So take a deep dive through this and tell us even more about really what experience design is and how you started connecting it to the consumers and not just to folks who wanted to be students at CIA.
Yes. Well, I love that you already have your head wrapped around it because that's like step number one, right? So you just explained it really well. So it's a great starting point. I will say, first of all, CIA did not approach me. I for sure approached them. I was still pretty young in my career, pretty early on. I loved Walla Walla so much, but I knew if I wanted to be able to impact the industry or impact my career, I needed to go outside of a 30,000 person city, knowing I would be a winemaker, right? I wasn't following the winemaker path. I could have stayed for sure. And I was just trying to find these fits around how can we deliver education ideally, right? Like with a connection to marketing, or really marketing is connecting it to like what your growth vision is, right? Like at the end of the day, what is our ultimate vision for this company or project, et cetera? And so I wanted like a role that touched both. And I don't know when I got so specific about it, but the thing is, when you get so specific about something, you find the needle in the haystack. For anyone who's like worried about that, you really do find the needle in the haystack, and they come to you. I think this was a prime example. And I loved this synergy that I had already read about Copia and had thought, what an amazing concept, also ahead of its time. And it was just like really this sort of amazing opportunity. And so I interviewed for the position. I was overqualified, arguably. And even my interviewer said, you know, you're overqualified for this. But the idea was that at the time when I interviewed, Copia had only just been purchased. They hadn't even like broken new ground on kind of construction updates and blueprints and things like that. And the person that I ended up reporting into, he was a visionary. I think he could see it 10 years down the road. And I was just in awe already to be being interviewed by the Culinary Institute of America. You know, that's how I entered the interview. And he was looking for someone who could be on the ground and operate and execute, and also understand vision and be able to hold on to that as the end goal while executing the day-to-day. And that's a skill set that is hard to find, I think, in people. And I had been consulting for a couple of years. That's the whole gig around consulting, right? You have to keep the North Star for the client. And so I was really intrigued. He had told me the experiences at the time were focused on what they called enthusiasts, right? People who were excited about food, but maybe not going to become a student, like you said. So how I explain it is like, my job was to take what the CIA taught the students, what the CIA advised the industry or developed for other companies from their consulting arm, and make it digestible and engaging for someone who didn't want to become a professional cook, but wants to interact with the CIA in some way, right? It's a brand extension.
Cool.
You know, how does CIA show up in everyday life? And what an honor, first of all, and also like what a big job, because I always prided myself on being aware of what projects we were executing, what conferences were coming up, what were we teaching in new curriculum, what was existing. My job was to know that information because we are an arm or an extension of the CIA to anybody else, right? And so when we talk about making something digestible, for me, that was where the experience design began, because you can make things digestible in different ways, but they have to resonate. And so when I walked into the business, what was already existing were chef demonstrations, which 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and even 10 years ago, were still a really popular format before people started using their phones. They would sit for an hour and listen to a recipe, execute it, and learn some tips, and then taste a bite after. That certainly changed, for sure, has changed. People just watch it online now. And other formats that existed that were experiential were like a 5-hour cooking class on a Saturday, which was super intense. And then also like a boot camp, which was multi-day experience, 2 to 5 days for people who wanted to invest more in how they cooked at home, but of course that weren't going to invest so much like as far as a degree was concerned. And these are folks who are really in a high disposable bracket, people who of course want the affiliation of CIA, right? And then also folks who believe CIA is the best place to learn. There's this belief there, and that makes sense. So from there, what I think is important to point out also about experience is I think you can look at an experience as something that it can seem effortless. It can seem from the outside lens as something that was easy to decide on, to design, to pull off. But I really wanted to help CIA grow in a sustainable way and like retool the products. I think it was a little bit of a surprise for me to walk in and shake stuff up a little bit, but my goal was, you know, what has worked historically and what hasn't, and also how is California uniquely positioned compared to the other two campuses at the time, San Antonio and Hyde Park, New York. And so there was a lot of like R&D the first year I was in the role. And at the same time of that R&D based on a pretty concrete, repetitive, like product offering, how could I retool it, expand it, own some of the development of it in California, and at the same time consider how this might all work at Copia, which is an 80,000 square foot building that when I was hired, the goal was most of the public programming, which were the enthusiast programs, and the industry programming would happen at Copia, along with some other outlets like a restaurant and a retail store and et cetera. So this was like this consumer playground eventually, but just kind of like giving you an inside look at like how to evolve experiences that already exist. And like we had data. I was like, well, what sells in July and what doesn't sell in July and what sells in January but doesn't sell in January? I mean, like the first full budget year, which is a mid-year fiscal, I was just toiling with what worked and what didn't, and simultaneously starting to design what would happen in the new building. So it was a really good time to get in when I did, you know?
Yes. I mean, you were thinking not only seasonally, so of course, what's available in terms of what you can cook with or what wine pairings you can have on hand, but like you said too, consumer trends. I mean, there are still the food and wine festivals that you see across the country where there are cooking demonstrations, but what's even better is if you work with a top chef and you actually make it yourself. Like that to me is so much cooler.
High touch.
Or just hearing their story. Yeah. So tell us a couple of those examples of like your favorite babies out of all of this. What were some of those experiences, those specific programs as you built the department yourself? Like, again, you came in and they said, you're overqualified, but you took the chance to say, it's okay if I start off at X role to begin with. I'm going to grow this really quickly. And you did. You moved up the ranks quite quickly.
Very quick for a big institution. I think part of that was because they had never had a building dedicated to programming like this. And they really needed someone who was going to understand the full picture of the building and how big public programming could be as part of the, frankly, revenue generation, right? Again, programming cannot just be this like fun thing. You know, we have a fiduciary responsibility. I feel like we have to perform. So part of when I started, we were a team of two. I was the operations focused and I had one chef, and very quickly became a team of three. And then literally like over the 5 years I was at CIA grew to about 30 a little time and the remainder on call. So it was a huge, like, strategic organizational growth period for the department that they trusted me to lead so long as we could perform. And so we expanded from, like, this idea that the CIA is only in the kitchen, right? Like, you're going to learn your techniques, et cetera, to also, like, the CIA is a thought leader in the way consumers interact with food and the food industry. CIA is also an opportunity for community, right? So we would do really large scale events. So I used to say like my department creates experiences for 2 people and 10,000 people. Like, I mean, you could go real big. I think some of our things could have been for 10,000 people, but you know, my favorite things, I think, like maybe constructs before exact ideas. Constructs were like when I started, we had one format, 5-hour long class, and then boot camp was like 6 hours. So anyone who's listening that's a chef, right? The 6 hours is the consumer time with the chef. That doesn't include mise en place for the following day. It doesn't include answering your emails from your department or others. It doesn't include planning or strategy or development, right? And so that's not a lot of balance. And it's a lot. You know, you are a concierge and a chef at the same time during something that is in high touch. So like, constructs for me were how do I help build a career for a chef that is balanced, because we don't see it a lot, and education is already a little imbalanced, right? We give more than we get if we're in education, but that's partly because of passion. And I just wanted my chefs to not be salaried stretching the day so long, and I wanted my on calls to get the day done without hitting overtime. Like, it was a pretty simple formula that I was aiming for. And so we started introducing like smaller, shorter format classes. What can we do in 2 hours? We can teach people dim sum and dumplings.
Yeah.
Right? We can teach people how to roll sushi.
Like things they can take them home. Like things for like a theme night, because everyone now loves dinner parties are back better than ever.
Right? Hosting.
So that sounds amazing.
Entertaining at home, right? Like these smaller, shorter classes with less lift for everybody, but that still deliver the message that CIA is the best of the best, right? Like easy.
Yes.
And I think also construct-wise, other things that I was like really just excited that we did was we added a lot. You know, I think when I started at CIA was when they started, like, magazines were saying, this is the experience era. This is the era of experience. Like every which way you could rephrase it. And so I was like, well, if that's true, like, I know we have an events department, but how are we selling into their offerings? Like, why don't we start expanding into large group sales? Like, why don't we also, when we're having a conference for doctors, add this hands-on cooking class opportunity and bolster revenue for both departments? Cool. And so a lot of my job was, I think anyone in marketing or comms understands, like, I got to know everything and we got to be working with everybody. And the best way I could explain it up was to say, this is going to make us more money, period.
And that's all I know. And like, this is like the soulless part of working with any sort of business, is being like, you got to make money. Like, it's the bottom line at the end of the day. Even when you're a nonprofit, like, it's the bottom line. You got to make money to keep the mission going and keep the efforts going.
Understanding the matrix is so important. It's just like designing a menu. It's like my family fun day Sunday class that's $15 a person isn't going to make us any money, but it's going to get 40 new people or some repeats in the door every Sunday that also might eat at the restaurant, that also might shop in the retail store, etc. And like, that was the point, right? We were this value add in every direction. And I would say, like, feather in my cap, because you asked, was really one of the last programs that I worked on, which was called Conversations at Copia. I worked with Chef Andrew Zimmern as the moderator for the series. And I mean, I don't think he would be like upset if I said this, but one of the things that was such a cool experience for me as a young professional was, like, I designed this program that was a conversation series to really positioning CIA as a thought leader in the consumer space around how we interact with food, this bridge between consumer and industry, and helping people understand real-time, like, challenges or trends in the food world. And who better to help me, honestly, right, translate that, I think. And when I pitched it and pitched the themes and who I wanted to involve, was an opportunity for me to expand also, like, the diversity of speakers and people we brought into CIA. Andrew took one look at the program and was like, I wouldn't change anything about this. Let's do it. And that was really cool because it really put a lot of, you know, I had been there for 4.5 years at that point. Like, what else can I do from here? And what other impact can I create? And that was like a really cool program that we got all the way to execution the last quarter of 2019.
And then we know what happens. But you chose that opportunity, which, again, everyone who's ever come on this podcast is like, was working on something, and then March 2020 hit, and the lessons that they learned from it, because if you can get through a tough time like that, the tough times we're even going through right now, you can do anything. So I could talk to you for days, honestly, about your CIA experience, but what I want to talk about is that moment. So you launched Maryam & Co. in August of 2020. Tell us why this time to go independent, why to do something truly on your own, why this timing, still at the height of the pandemic, when you're focusing on designing experiences and strategies behind that for folks.
Well, I should say, like, toward the end of 19, I started getting asks for what kind of experiences, you know, could I build for XYZ, or the idea of being able to consult on my own started before the pandemic. And I did speak with my boss about it because I wanted to help more. My whole goal was like, okay, if this is working, like, I want people to feel more educated, more connected to food and beverage, or other industries even, right? And so I had discussions about that because it was coming in anyway. And when March happened, it was just right after we finished a really big program for the beverage industry. And I think it left a lot of impression in people's minds that I was really tied to wine as well. And so I think that's just important because my first phone calls kind of right as things got really crazy and a lot of things were shutting down were focused around beverage because I had kind of post conversations at Copia, had finished a beverage industry summit, and that was what kind of was in people's minds going into 2020. And the shutdown, my whole team got furloughed immediately. And so many people, we just talked about how much time and effort and intention went into building that team. And nobody knew anything what was going to happen at that point, right? I did feel in my intuition that those folks, having built relationships with them, like I knew they were going to have to move on faster than they would be able to come back. And the team was working up until the very last day. The proudest accomplishment was the team I built. And I think I knew that from the start of the pandemic. And the fiscal, like I said, is mid-year. And so I had a pretty good compass on how things might go. And truly, it was all in with goodwill. It was just my career was at a high and I didn't want to miss a beat. And I had already had some calls come in and was like, okay, I think I just got to try this. And like, I do think as horrific as a period of time COVID was, you do hear of so many creative projects and impact projects being born at that time because there was space for them. Or desperate need, right? And so I just started. The first project I worked on was outside of hospitality, and that was amazing. I worked for a market that was for women of color artisans in the Bay Area, and then I helped them transition. Ooh. Yeah, it was amazing. Cool. It was so amazing. I worked on like the experience design for it. So, what does this look like in a virtual space? And that at the time was not something anyone was comfortable with. And we were like on the front end of exploring digital solutions for community and experience. So that's how I started. And I knew from the very beginning, and I think by then a lot of people knew I was really already committed to the work I was doing being in a sustainable space and driving equity forward. And that was not a new thing in my work. It was just all of a sudden much more possible because funding started to become available for those kinds of things. It's an ick moment, but it's true.
Yes. I mean, that is also what my partner Tim experienced. He, for years, had the idea of his like early stage venture capital fund in Chicago for people who looked like Chicagoans and not just white straight men. And it took, sadly, until that summer. And then suddenly they raised the money quick as that. And so I'm sure you were experiencing that same thing of, it's ick because people should have already been paying attention and people should have already been caring, and it's not a trend. Just like today, people pulling back, ick, that shouldn't be the trend. Tell me more about how you then took that wave and started applying it to other clients and what you were doing them to push.
Well, I think a lot of people knew me as someone who could create experiences at the time, what felt most relevant to the industry, specifically, heavy beverage leaning. A lot of food programming was like this too, but virtually, how do we create a conference, right? Yes. And so, I mean, from that perspective, I just was happy to come on as a consultant or as a speaker if I could bring people with me. And like, I think there were a couple of years there where we had to really be educating people at conferences. We had to have the diversity panel, and it was grueling for anyone who had to speak to that outside of what they were really passionate or what their expertise was, because of tokenism and because of an extreme lag in understanding within the specifically wine and beverage space. But I definitely was an early proponent of, if the programming is diverse and equitable, we don't have to have a frickin' conversation about it. The whole point of it will be what is delivered, and it will be good. And that was like, years ago, like before even 2020, when I was doing it at CIA, and I was still having to educate on that front. And I took a lot of that into my consulting work because it was really important to me. But I did feel like it was helping people catch up. And then I think the other piece was in a lot of my consulting work, that's on the programming side. I've transitioned most of our models, as long as the client can meet me there. We transitioned all of our models to equal payments. I mean, and I still think today you could probably ask Brene Brown at some point in her career, she's been severely underpaid compared to her white, straight, cis male counterpart. Right? And so my whole thought was the experience is going to be great. I can design an experience, but what I really want to know is the design of this experience has a ripple effect. And so how can I make sure people are getting paid? What are the barriers beyond being paid as a speaker? How can we sustain eventual travel when things started kind of turning back into full time, I don't know, return to in person? And just wanting to know that like what we were doing as a company, Maryam Company, was all in line with like creating more sustainability and equity in whatever space we were operating in. It didn't have to just be wine or food, you know? So that's just been really important from the beginning. But I think like part of why I know how to measure that accountability is because we went for the B Corp certification. I was doing a lot of that, but going through that certification, which is grueling and difficult and possible as a 1 to 2 person company, it gives you the tools you need to measure, you know, what that impact is, right? Like how to also present that impact and to say, yeah, this program is super cool. Let's say we talked about jelly beans, but while we were talking about jelly beans, men and women were paid the same. Men were paid the same as women of color. However you want to translate that, right? Like everyone was equitably paid. And the people who spoke about jelly beans represented jelly beans. You know, easy, not hard, not rocket science. And then we attracted those audiences because of that. Duh.
Incredible. Yes. It is very much a duh moment. Like, I agree with you. And I'm so thankful and grateful that you and your team are doing this work because it is, I can't believe we're still arguing today that a man or a woman provides more value than the other based on their gender or someone's heritage or someone's sexuality. It's so gross. And I love that you're just being transparent and saying, if everyone's getting paid the same, like everyone's going to perform really well and earn what they deserve. And you're going to see a bigger economic output because you're reaching more people and they actually connect with this. Like you said, Andrew Zimmern, great. But like you said too, he was also saying we got to push forward other people who aren't someone who looks like me. So where have you seen things in your work in these 5 years since? What has been really promising to you? And where do you think in the many areas that we need to keep pushing things forward?
Wow.
I know, big question.
Experience design is super creative, but I also really value data and I really value systems. And I think experiences built on those two things are better than not. And I say that because where I think things are promising are where organizations or companies are holding themselves accountable through their processes, like applications for grants or applications for trips. And there are specific tools being used to help overcome bias, to help make sure that opportunity is given to more than what has historically received it. And so like that's a systems change that feels really promising to me, that I could name 10 to 15 orgs right now that I know are employing that. And that's just off the top of my head. I'm sure there's so many more. And I think that has changed wine and food drastically, you know, and those orgs have been doing the work for a long time and haven't stepped away from what I think a lot of other companies and orgs have stepped away from. So I think it's a little vague, but I find some of the systems change promising. And that really is because at the end of the day, so much of the lack of opportunity in our industries has come from the systems themselves. and supremacy, right? I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
So that feels promising. It still needs to be changed. It's not enough. 15 organizations is for sure not enough, but it exists and it works. And so therefore I have to hope that it will be repeated. I would say on the flip side, like on the front facing or more the glamour facing side, I still see a great diversity in who is speaking on topics, on panels, who's represented, who's in the room. I'm encouraged by accomplices not bailing, the white cis male not bailing in this moment. I'm encouraged by those folks who are continuing to be champions for this very important issue. Yeah, those are areas. I do think also I'm very careful to praise the media because it's mired in issues. But why I started in food was for belonging. You know, why I fell in love with food was belonging, and seeing more representation on these TV shows, both on the sort of reality food TV and fictional TV, is really promising to me too. Yeah. The improvement side is larger than the promise you said. I'm
I was like, endless?
Which word should I choose?
Potentially endless.
Yeah, we've
exponential.
always had an exponential opportunity to improve. Like no matter what time period we're in, we've always had the exponential opportunity to improve. And so why aren't people choosing it in this moment? You know, that needs a lot of work. And I think, unfortunately, we feel more divided now than we did even in 2020 because we had this opportunity to put things on the table, to make real change, to facilitate these systemic changes that needed to happen. And obviously at a very high administrative level, so much of that has already been stripped away. But what it has also done is create space for people to come back into their comfort and privilege and to step away or take a break from these really pressing issues that were more pressing, obviously, under a different administration. And I think just there's an excuse. And I would say the other excuse is that people are worried about the performance of, especially in beverage and on the wine side, of the industry. And I say there is a lot rooted in fact on economic impact, but I also think there's a lot of solution that we have not pursued. And a big part of that solution is equity in the wine space. And so like we are just dismissing that opportunity to avoid a solution, which is an excuse, right? So I don't know. Those are some areas I can think of. In the most politician way possible, I said what I said, obviously. But I just,
You did beautifully.
Could be better.
I was like, Maryam, use the real words. Like, this is the type of podcast where I want anyone to speak very freely. I like to do so myself as well, which is we are in a time where it is very public that you can be punished for believing in equity and diversity and inclusion. And that's just so weird. Like we're in the twilight zone, to say the least, especially if like, yes, okay, we're talking business. You want to talk facts. The more people you bring to the table, the more money you get. So you're just excluding people who could be your customers, who could be your partners. And so I think your work, if we're even just thinking of it from a dollar signs perspective, speaks volumes at that level as well.
Yeah.
But thank you for using your platform. I mean, you yourself were on the cover of Wine Enthusiast just 2 years ago, which must have been like, oh my gosh, such a dream moment. But I appreciate you using your platform to keep pushing this issue and these many issues to the forefront.
Absolutely. And I mean, like that moment is a really good example of important changes. And also for me, like, if you're going to push and then they put you on the cover, I had a lot of confronting thoughts like, my dad is Muslim, I'm holding a glass of wine on the cover and my leg is showing. It's like there's a lot of other identity intersections represented in that cover that are for another podcast and another day, but was super important because when I started in food and beverage, yeah, I mean, I never saw anything like that. Padma was like our only girl. And, you know, to be on the cover of a magazine like that was just like, oh my gosh, maybe this helps other people feel more like they belong.
Yeah. And I think that's always been your mission since day one is you want everyone to belong at the table and to feel included. And I also like that you've paved your own way so much that I think you can feel proud of saying like, yes, I want to be included, but you're at the place where like people should want to be included with me and everything I'm doing.
Well, girl, that is a harder one. That is harder for sure. I don't know. It's still it's a lot of work to get to that point. And also I just think like, yes, true. And I'm just like, what is the next challenge? Like, what is the next rung, I think? And where am I bringing people? How am I being brought? And how am I bringing people to? I don't think I would not be stopping here.
Absolutely. Well, you just had some time on your hands. And the other month, you decided to open something else. Truly could talk to you for hours and want to make sure we talk about your newest baby, PLAYTE Kitchen in Napa. So spelled Playte. So you're playing, and let's play on words, plate. Tell us how this came about with your partners and how things are going so far in terms of the programming that you're essentially designing for CIA is now in your own space.
Yeah, PLAYTE Kitchen is a hands-on cooking class company, and we just expanded into this larger space. We've been operating since 2021 in a smaller studio space, and part of that is because the world was still very virtual at that time. So we were doing a lot of virtual classes, a lot of content, and also very small hands-on cooking classes. And then as life returned to in-person, the demand for in-person experiences, both private and corporate, started to grow. And so PLAYTE Kitchen started with Chef Matt Daly and Chef Sandy Sauter, myself, and two additional partners, Janae Patrick and Josh Anderson. And really, we were just so passionate about continuing to teach people how to cook. And we were also really willing to explore other mediums to do so, really specifically the virtual world. And that was how we launched the business. Like, there was a need. We had already done a lot of research as Maryam Company to figure out what platforms do we use, how do we get in front of people, and we just went. And so this October, we officially opened the doors to our expanded space, our official HQ now, and it's for reference, the studio we were working in is 600 square feet, and this new space is 2,600 square feet. So it's a huge change, but it was always our goal to have a space of our own and a large space of our own. So we wanted to have this space where people could cook from this place of like accessibility and approachability. Because I think one of the things that people shy away from when it comes to cooking at home is the complexity of a recipe or the effort, honestly, that it takes, right?
Yes.
And while like videos and online learning are completely available to people, we still see that folks are craving this quintessential social ingredient, which is experiences around food. And so we are now positioned in this space to host our cooking classes, but also to host all of those private or corporate classes that are coming our way, and to really act as like a hub for community gatherings in Napa. And I think that kind of comes back to this programming. Our 2.0 programming is what classes have been working really well, what are people craving, and where are the spaces we can fill in programming in Napa. What does it look like to bring families back into the fold when we talk about food? How do we give back to our community of farm workers and local producers and you name it, artisans or culinary producers? We want this space to be thought of as a place of gathering, and like we want to have fun, right? Foodie fun. And so PLAYTE is spelled with a Y, yes, to your point, to play and remember that food is fun. But it's also, we focus on the why of food, if you know the why, if you know the why, you're likely to do it again or you're more confident. And I just never get over, I've seen them teach classes over and over again. I could do some of their demos with my eyes closed because I don't teach the classes. And I would say, I just never get over the simplicity of something resonating with people because they just haven't been taught it. And I think about like my first day in culinary theory, and I think about why that feeling of the why and sort of approachability would have probably felt better than my anxiety ridden night before. But, I think we've found this really nice little niche of teaching, getting people excited. And I will say, like, another element of PLAYTE Kitchen is just wanting to be super intentional about, like, when you come to PLAYTE Kitchen, what you cook on, what the ingredients you cook with, and the tools you use to make the food are all things you could find at home or you might have at home. And I think that's a differentiator for us. They're not learning in a commercial space. It's not loud and big and scary. It just feels like your home kitchen, maybe just a little bigger.
I love that so much. I love everything you're doing. What do you see next for the future for yourself? I mean, you've done so much so far. What do you say that you're most proud of? And what do you want to see next for everything you're working on?
Great question. I'm sure so many people in my life would love the answer to it, including myself. I think, I've been in this industry for over 20 years now in some form or fashion. I started in this industry as a kid. And I think I started Maryam Company like at this amazing, when you're in your 30s, when you're in your 20s, like, you're like, hell yeah, I'm like ready to do something. I'm making an impact. And like a lot of my decisions leading up to starting Maryam Company and thereafter have been like, what is the next big splash? Like, what is the ripple effect of helping people understand themselves better through food and beverage? And I come back to that a lot now as I look at what the opportunities for evolution in my career look like. I will always love food and beverage, but I'll always love people feeling like they belong and making discoveries about themselves and a subject more. And food and beverage has always been my medium for that. I don't think that will go away, but I'm open to like how that might evolve even in a bigger way. I love our industries so much, but I am wanting like additional impact. And I think like I see it a lot in my consulting work when we're bringing people in from outside the food and beverage industry to have these experiences, these discussions. So I'm exploring that a little bit more, that side of my work, like facilitations for leaders and just like strategic messaging and working on these like maybe larger scales of industry to help them be more conscious and engaged when it comes to their sustainability and equity.
Yeah. And I see you just having unlimited potential to do so. One, there could be something in politics for you in the future. I don't think I'm the first person to probably say that to you.
Not even the 10th person to say that to me. I just don't, where does one start? I don't know.
I think with your own community and everything you're doing, well, I hate this part. We're at the last question before the world's best and hardest question. You've given so many great pieces of advice today, but what's one piece of advice you'd give someone who is looking to be an entrepreneur themselves, either within food and bev or any other industry?
I think I have two pieces of advice. The first piece comes from a lot of mentees asking, how did you get where you are?
Yeah.
And my honest feedback is that I learned a lot from working with other people and at other companies. I do think sometimes people can put the cart before the horse when it comes to an idea and a passion without maybe having like the tools they need to run the physical business, which is not glamorous and frankly the least fun part of my job. And I still have to do it because there's just me, Maryam and company, yes, but it's me writing the checks and balancing books and doing stuff that I never frankly cared to do.
I know.
But I am better at it because I worked at other places and I was taught a number of ways of looking at things. And I value that part of my career, and it for sure made me a better entrepreneur and a strategic thinker. So that's one piece of advice. The other piece of advice is like, if you keep asking people what you should do, you stop asking yourself what you should do. And so you just, is it what you want to do? Do you want to work all the time because you love it so much it will never feel like you're working all the time? Do you believe so firmly and unshakably in what it is you're trying to accomplish that you can wake up and tell people about it every single day? Like, ask yourself those questions, because that is entrepreneurship. Is this crazy, sometimes blind belief in your potential success.
Yes.
And in what you have to offer, whether it's a product or a service. But you got to be able to live and breathe and die by it. You really do.
Ask yourself. Oh, that's a beautiful way of putting that. Thank you. I hadn't heard it said that way.
Well, thanks. I'm listening as I'm saying it. I'm looking at what I need to go do it.
I know. Maryam, thank you again so much. A little reminder for folks as we get here. This is called The Perfect Bite, not just because it's a perfect bite of our founders across the food and beverage industry, but it's also because we all have our own perfect bites, those memories and recipes and dishes that we're never going to forget and that put a smile on your face. So, what is your perfect bite?
I'm deciding between my identities here of perfect bite, really and truly. But I always will say what is first to my heart. And so I would say, for me, a perfect bite is like perfectly cooked paratha or pakora, right? So something that has like this fried, buttery, salty situation. And I love vegetables. So let's go with pakora, and like the best, just the absolute like best chutney that you can have, like the deepest green, most just herby, minty chutney with a little bit of tamarind chutney and a bite of pakora, like while it's hot and crunchy.
Oh my gosh.
Oh. Yeah, that's speaking to me right now.
That sounds beautiful. And I could picture all the colors too while you said it. And like it said, it brings back to that part of you and your heritage and something you fell in love with at an early age. Maryam, this has been incredible. Can you let folks know where to find you? So your social accounts, websites, and the venue. Any upcoming events we should know about?
Yeah, you can find me. Literally, I'm a pretty accessible person. So my website and Instagram are Maryam Company. My name is spelled Maryam. And you can find PLAYTE Kitchen on Instagram, PLAYTE Kitchen. And I send a monthly newsletter out from Maryam Company. It's a little bit of strategy, a little bit of editorial, just a really personalized note. It's not a spammy newsletter or selling you anything, just kind of a community-driven one. So if you're looking for like information on events in the wine space or culinary space, or even I put a lot of like financial equity opportunities in there, financial grant opportunities, things like that. Those are some really easy places. And if you respond to the newsletter, it comes straight to my inbox. So I respond back.
Incredible. Maryam, thank you again for all your time, your wisdom, and the work you're doing. I'm so glad that we met and that, 2,500 miles doesn't have to keep us far apart here. I can't wait to see you next time in Napa, have some Cosmos and martinis and wine together. And everyone, thank you so much for listening in. This was Maryam Ahmed's Perfect Bite. Thanks for tuning in to The Perfect Bite today. You can listen to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks in advance for subscribing, rating, and reviewing. You can follow The Perfect Bite on social media @PerfectBitePod. Now go get something good to eat.